EMDR should be something that every single therapist on the planet is well trained in. So when I graduated as a therapist, a long time ago now, I first thought that therapy was talk therapy. I thought that it was like psychoanalysis. It was, I grew up following Freud and Carl Jung and Irving Yalom, and I just had this idea that therapy was this long, drawn out process where you slowly uncover information and insights about somebody, and then having an insight, eventually they'll create change, and if you follow those masters of talk therapy, you'll see that the types of therapies would last 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years sometimes for some people, and I just thought that was normal. I thought, I'd be this therapist that I'd have clients for forever. I only need like 20 or 30 clients, and then I'd just be with them for the rest of my life, and we're all good. Be sort of like an extension of their family. Can you imagine a therapist at a bar mitzvah or a wedding or something like that? Hey, here's my therapist. No. 3 years after I graduated, I was still working in an agency. I did my practicum in. I was working with male survivors of sexual abuse. That was the main thing that I was working on at that time. And I was working with the same clients for years, 2, 3 years at a time. And at the third year, I was starting to burn out. My clients were most likely burning out as well. It just felt like we weren't going anywhere. I was hearing the same stories over and over and over again. And while, I love to hold the space for my clients, and I was enjoying the work that I was doing, I started to feel like it was like sort of never ending. I would push the ball up like Sisyphus. I'd push the ball up and it would fall down. And it just, wasn't going anywhere. I guess it was a boulder, not a ball. Anyway, so I started to burn out. I started to think, oh my God, I'm 3 years into my master's education, and if I am burning out now, imagine what it would be like 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. I would be so miserable. So I had to think, what can I do to salvage my master's education? So it's not all for naught. I like this idea of therapy, but I'm not any good at it apparently, because my clients are not progressing. So I remembered in my master's education that there was this thing called EMDR. I didn't even remember if it was EDMR or EMDR or EMWET. I remembered I wrote it down in my margins. So I rifled through some of my old notebooks and I saw it, and there it is, EMDR. That's what it was. So I Googled it, and I found a training that came on in my area, and pretty close to the time. And I signed up, paid my money, and I was there, ready for my training. And then I got my instructor at the time, terrific guy, very seasoned veteran in EMDR, and he was telling us that here you are, you wave your hands and stuff back and forth in front of the client, and all of a sudden they're better. And I was like, well, that looks an awful lot like hypnosis. I don't really want to do that. That's not gonna work. I just didn't get it. I was like, there's no way. And they were talking about like severe disturbances, like panic attacks, and you're going like this, and all of a sudden the person's feeling better. That looks ridiculous. So I was planning my escape route, and I thought, you know what? At lunchtime, I'm gonna bail. I'm gonna, duck out. Nobody's gonna see me even leave. I'm just gonna get the heck out of here. See you later. And then I started getting closer to that lunchtime, and I started hearing some pretty good stories about EMDR now. I saw some more demonstrations. I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. But at the same, also, I spent all this money on this training. It was thousands of dollars even back then. And I thought, I need the credits anyway, so I might as well just stay, suck it up, buttercup, and do the training. So I did the training, one of the best decisions ever. So I learned a lot in that training. And I started applying it. This is where it gets really good. I started applying it to my clients. So I had one client of mine that really stands out to me, that he was abused by a family member. And he would tell me before, he'd say, Robert, if I ever saw my abuser again, I would effing kill him. And I thought, okay, I mean, that sounds about accurate. If I went through what you went through, I'd probably feel the same way. So I'll just try this EMDR thing with this guy and see what happens, right? So we did about 2 or 3, I think about 3 90-minute sessions together, and then after the end of that, he says, Robert, you know, if I ever saw my abuser again, like in the mall or something, I could probably have a civil conversation with him. I mean, we wouldn't be friends or anything like that, but I'd be able to say hi and talk and be okay. And I thought, really? What? Seriously? Inside voice, right? Of course. Outside, I'm like, oh, I'm really great to hear that. So this EMDR thing seems to be working well for you. And inside, I'm going, what? Oh my God, this is amazing. So the next client, you know, same thing. Next client, same thing. Like, this is amazing. So I was like, all in on EMDR. So I even put it on my logo, Grigore Counseling, EMDR therapy, that's what we're doing. And now, of course, we're well known for EMDR, and people come from all over the world to work with us. Worked with over 1,000 people, been all over the news, and all different types of podcasts, interviews, stuff like that. So obviously, I'm an expert in EMDR now, but at that time, I was like, this is amazing. I cannot even, and that was when I had the basic training in EMDR, just the basics, and that was effective, and I was helping people faster than I ever thought possible. I was like, this is amazing. Like 2-3 years of talk therapy didn't do anything for my clients, and then now it's like, wow, amazing. And I'm also, I've been a client myself, so I think all therapies have their place, and they can really be a benefit working together. So I just want to be clear about that. But I was in talk therapy myself when I was struggling with some really dysfunctional relationships that I was in. I was abused by my partner, and I had a lot of attachment trauma. Things that I was working through was really painful for me, and a lot of other things. And I would go to my therapist, my talk therapist, really great guy. Loved what he was doing. He felt really good at it, and I think he was really good at it, and like, he was a good guy. And I would leave those sessions every single time totally amped up. I was like that. And I didn't know what was going on at that time. Of course, I know now what's going on. And so I was activating my nervous system, and I didn't have any way of putting things back. And the way that I figured out was I would go across the street from my therapist's office, and I would do shots, and that would calm my nervous system down. I didn't know what I was doing at that time. I was just reacting here. Now I know what I was doing. So it's important to note that not always, but sometimes if you're dealing with trauma and all you're doing is talking about your traumas, that can actually re-traumatize you, because you're activating the nervous system, and then you're only using logic or rational thinking to try to work your way through this problem, not your entire body. We'll get to more of those details later, but I'm sharing this so that you know that I've been on both sides of the couch, if you will, right? So, maybe 5 years of talk therapy, I spent $50,000 or something, a lot, on therapy, and I was like, I just wasn't getting any better. And then I did EMDR therapy, and suddenly things were starting to fall into place for me. It was like puzzle pieces started fitting. I started, really feeling like I was worthy, and the rest is history. I get into a lot more details about that, but to know that I've been on both sides, I really know how powerful this stuff really is. We can process through things in sometimes minutes versus years. So it's huge. It's hard to even compare the two. So what is EMDR exactly? Let's get into that. Like, EMDR is, first, it's not talk therapy. Nothing against talk therapy, but talk therapy would fit into about phase 2 of EMDR's 8 phases. So EMDR is broken down, the standard protocol is broken down into 8 different phases. You don't have to know what all of the phases are, but they are as follows. So history, which is pretty standard with all types of therapies. You got to know who is sitting in front of you. But some of the ways that an EMDR therapist gathers history is different than the way that some other therapies might gather history. Some of it's the same, but some of it's very different. The next phase is preparation. So you want to make sure the person's nervous system is ready to engage in the work that we're actually about to do. And so preparation will consist of a couple different things. So regardless of where you're coming from, the person's trained from EMDR, you're going to learn a couple of different techniques here to teach your clients. So if you're the client, you're going to learn some coping strategies to bring your nervous system down to a more of a calmer space. And I'm going to show a graph in a couple of minutes here as to what we're talking about here. When you go into the type of EMDR that we do, we want not just to ensure that you've got some tools, we're actually working on a neurological level to get you prepared for the next phases coming. So if you think about what distress is, so everything comes from anxiety. Anxiety is stress in the body. It's a state. It's not a feeling. Anxiety is a state. So when you are in a state of anxiety, you're experiencing worry or fear, or even on the other side of the fight or flight, it might be the fight part, might be really anger, frustration, rage. All of that could be experienced as anxiety in the body. So, and what anxiety is past experiences that are felt now in this moment, but projected into the future. So past experiences projected into the future, felt now. That's what anxiety really is. So when things happen to us in our lives, it creates a snapshot of that moment in our brain. Our brains pick up everything that's ever happened to you since 2 weeks after gestation. There's research to suggest this, that after 2 weeks of gestation, our body is picking up information, and it hangs on to everything. There's a great plug here, Body Keeps the Score, Bessel Van Kolk. You should read it, it's fantastic. Complicated, but fantastic. Essentially, the idea is that your body is your life's umbilical cord to all of your life's trauma. So your body is keeping the score all the time as to what's going on for you. So things happen, you have a body sensation, there's a feeling that might go with that, and there's a belief about yourself, especially when we get into 3 years old or 3 years of age and older, where there's more episodic memory that somebody will hang on to. So before that, things can just feel scary or good or bad, or that sort of there's not really clear pictures that are stored. It's not always the case. There are some people can remember very early on memories from childhood, but for the most part, sort of think about that bell curve. You've got, like, in the middle, most people only have episodic memory around 3, 4, 5 years old. Anyway, there's a belief about yourself that gets imprinted, bam, like that, and then that's carried on. Now, 1 or 2 or 3 events might not be that much. Like me, I was bullied as a kid in school, and like once in a while, my nickname was Short Fat with Glasses. If I got called that once or twice or 3 times, probably not the end of the world, I'd be okay. But I got called that thousands of times growing up as a kid, and guess what my belief about myself was? Short, fat with glasses. That's who I was. So I believed that I was worthless going through the world, and when I would think about dating or think about standing up for myself, I had such anxiety and I just couldn't progress. I just didn't feel like I had any value. So I was putting myself into relationships that just were not beneficial for me. So my worth was coming from my ability to help others do something. So I'd really pick people that just weren't the best fit for me. Anyhow, so So when your brain and nervous system go through an experience, it's a snapshot, and then every time you get this information through sight, sound, smells, body sensations, scenarios, patterns, it all gets inputted into your system and uploaded into one of those, let's say, filing system in your brain called the I'm not worthy file, or the I'm not good enough file, or the I'm not safe file, or I don't belong file, or I don't deserve file. Like, we have these different neurological networks. So the way that we do EMDR in the second preparation phase, number 2, is we start to give the client some more information, sort of build up that adaptive neural network. So if the problem the person's coming in for to deal with is like, I'm not safe, we're looking at other examples in life where you do feel safe regardless, and we're actually tapping that into the nervous system so that the person can feel that they are safe. Not all the time, but at times. So we're activating that neural network. Okay, so that's important. Phase 3 is assessment. We start to build out the target sequence plan. From there, what are the memories and events that we're going to start to process and get ready for the actual desensitizing part. Phase 4 is desensitization, the mouthful. This is the point. This is what everybody thinks about EMDR when they first sign up. They think, well, they sit down and the therapist is just going to start waving their hand in front of their face. Not actually what's happening right away. It happens in phase 4. When we get to this part, now we're actually doing the bilateral stimulation, and this is where the memories start to fade. The disturbance starts to fade. You'll have a 0 to 10 scale. The clinician will ask the client, when you think about the memory, how disturbing is it right now? 0 is neutral, 10 is the worst it could be, and then you do this, for however long, and then the client starts to feel quite differently. So they'll get down to a 0 most times. So my client that I talked about before, thinking about the abuse memory, it's no longer disturbing to him anymore. It's not like he's going to go and say, hey, I'm so glad that happened to me, yay. No, because that's not realistic. But he doesn't need to believe that he's not safe anymore in the world, right? He can trust other people, just not that person, right? So the world is now safe for me, I'm safe in the world regardless since that happened to me, regardless of that happening. That's what we're talking about. Phase 5 is about linking the adaptive neural network of the I am safe regardless with the now neutral I'm not safe memory. So now we think about that memory alone, that memory with I am safe regardless, and now we start to have new neural networks that are really tying together, and that person starts to generalize that information to different experiences in their life where they actually do feel safe. So other times where I might have to trust somebody else, and I can now do that because I'm not worried about them stabbing me in the back in some way, shape, or form, right? So like for example, this would be my client, like going on a date or something like that. So when he thinks about that memory, it's no longer disturbing, and he now believes that he's safe regardless, and he can now move on from that. Then the stage after that, phase 6, is about scanning the body. So now we're checking a somatic recall here, to head to toe, thinking about that memory. Is there any disturbance attached to that? When you think about the positive belief, I am safe regardless, is there any negative charge anywhere? Basically, is there any part of your body that has any doubt how true this is, that you're actually safe now that you think about that memory? And as long as that's all clear, then we move on. And the interesting thing here, when I first started learning EMDR, was that phase 7 was called closure. I was like, why is closure in phase 7 and not 8? That doesn't make any sense, right? So generally speaking, sessions are shorter, like 15-minute session or even 90-minute sessions. You're going to eventually wrap up that target, and you're going to move on to something else. Either that session, or you're going to close the session. Use phase 2, one of those preparation techniques, to just pack it away, and then get grounded and ready to leave, and do your day. And then the following session is phase 8. That's where we check on the work we just did. So that would be like, okay, when you think about the abuse memory, Is there any part of you that has any charge related to I'm not safe? And if there is, it won't be as high as it was before, most likely. It's going to be much lower. And then usually it's just a few sweeps, and then we're good. So then that's the part of where the brain actually is now looking back and going, oh, I feel quite different. That doesn't bother me anymore. Okay, then I can let that go. Analogy that I use often is let's say that you're a little kid and you fell off of a slide and you hurt yourself really badly, and now you've got a fear of heights. Totally understandable for a little kid, right? But then you go through life and you never do anything that involves heights, like you won't go in an elevator, you gotta walk the stairs, or stuff like that. And then let's just say you have your own kids, and then you go to the park and you walk up to that same slide, because of course you don't want to deny your kid sliding, right? And you go, oh my god, that slide comes up to like here on me, that's nothing, and boom, it's gone. Usually, like, that's enough sometimes for the brain to just go, that's dumb, I don't need to worry about that anymore, and we move on. So same thing here, where the reevaluation is looking back on that past memory, and you go, that doesn't bother me anymore. Interesting. Cool. I guess I can now let it go. And then it's let go. Okay, so the brain is now consolidating the new reality for that memory inside the nervous system, and we're good to go. And that won't have to be reprocessed again. Okay, so what is happening in the brain is really amazing. So all these past experiences are stored in the body, and the brain is just using that past information to deal with what's going on now. It's called adaptive information processing. That's what EMDR is based upon. I'm reacting to what's going on right now and in my thoughts about the future based upon what I've seen before in the past. Makes a lot of sense, right? Let's say you were driving I live in BC, so you're driving on Coquihalla, and I needed snow tires because it was icy on the road, and the next time I drive on the Coquihalla, I'm probably gonna want to have snow tires because I know there's probably ice up there, right? But not necessarily the case, right? Certain periods it might be different. But I would, if I didn't process this, if I had an event or something, I would probably be over-prepared, which is better when you're driving, I guess, than under-prepared. But the idea here is past information, I'm using that to inform what I'm doing in the future. So, in terms of what's going on in the brain, though, with EMDR, is we are rewiring what the past experiences were, because it's not effective now. It's not adaptive right now, right? It's maladaptive, right? So, like, the boss can't give you any criticism without you blowing it out of proportion and freezing, or thinking you're going to go, quit, or they must feel horrible about me, that sort of thing. And that's actually stuff that happened to you way back in the day, right? So it's not current. So what I used to believe, I was on a global news interview, I used to believe that it was just the bilateral stimulation. This is what I was taught. It was that just the bilateral stimulation is what's actually creating the change. It's not the case. It's actually it's part of it, but what's happening is when you activate the nervous, you're bringing it up, you're feeling how it felt right then, now, right, or how it feels now as it did back then. The body doesn't know any difference between what happened 20 years ago and what happened 20 seconds ago. It's the same in the body. So you're pulling it up, you're activating it, and then the bilateral stimulation is so distracting, and it can be done with hand movements or tapping or following a ball back and forth on the screen, doesn't matter, headphones. It's so distracting that the brain can't hang on to the disturbance from the memory and follow this task. This is called the working memory theory of processing. So it's by bringing in this, activating this, but then also distracting the brain from this memory, allows the information to move, and then new connections are made via the bilateral stimulation. Information is crossing the corpus callosum in the brain, and you're making new neural connections, feeling differently, using information from current life to help you inform and change past memories to allow you to get past them. Okay, so that's all really, really, really important stuff. It's very different from other types of therapies, right? Where you think the insights alone are what creates change. EMDR is something that changed my life and thousands of clients' lives that I've worked with over the years. It's so powerful, and one thing I would love to urge, if you are an executive or CEO or president of a company or an HR person in a company, or you have a connection with somebody like that, is to urge as that person to, or that company, to consider bringing on an EMDR therapist. It doesn't have to be us. Bring on an EMDR therapist, to work with that team or that organization, because mental health is so important when you think about how an organization functions. This is a family, and if you have a dysfunctional family, things might not work out so well. But if you have a really adaptive, functioning family that are really working together, imagine what it is that you're going to accomplish. So I highly recommend that. And also, how to know if you're ready for EMDR? Basically, if you have a pulse, you could be a fit for EMDR. But ask questions in the comments, and I'll get them to them, of course. But if you have a pulse, if you have anxiety, if you're struggling in your life, you could be a good fit for EMDR. Usually people that have more self-awareness, you have an idea, you can say, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling anger right now, or I feel like, if you can identify that, you're going to have good success probably with EMDR. If you struggle with that, it might be better for you to start with another type of therapy where you can start to get to know more of how you're feeling and build your self-awareness a little bit more, and then dive into EMDR. So again, all therapies have their place. And of course, if you feel like you are ready for EMDR, I recommend booking a consultation. It's free with us. And you can go on to our site, book it right there from the site, and also go into our services page and scroll down. There's a free copy of my book called You Need Therapy. It's all about EMDR, and I believe that we all need therapy, so you can learn a lot about EMDR. And in the back of that book, I also talk about how to select an EMDR therapist that's right for you. And there are a couple of things that are really valuable information in there, and there's different training levels of EMDR. So there's EMDR basic trained in there, and then certified EMDR, and then approved EMDR consultant, and then approved trainer in EMDR. And there's different organizations that exist out there, so you want to make sure that if you go for this, the person trained is trained by an approved, accredited organization like EMDR International Association. And then what type of trainings do they actually have? Do they have experience working with the population that you are? Do they have extra training that they can talk about? All those are really important information, so you want to ask some really good questions there to, interview that therapist, and then maybe interview 2 or 3 different therapists to really get a feel for what's out there. I'll talk later in a different video about the differences between online and in-person therapy, because I do both, and there's pros and cons to both. But if you are a professional as well, I highly recommend you watch another video that I did. In that video, I talk about how EMDR can really save time with treatment, regardless of anxiety, depression, PTSD, or addiction, or some sort of self-sabotage. It's really, really valuable information in there. Again, going into some more details about the nervous system and some of my experiences with EMDR. So catch you in the next video.